I hope you can hear me, and I hope you can see the screen that's being shared. It simply says the name of the group and the coordinates. In particular, Juliana, can you see it now? Okay. So maybe let's wait for a couple of minutes more, and then we can start. Well, in previous sessions, I could see that sometimes there are some issues with some browsers. I'm using Chrome just in case, but also it depends if you have any plugin for kind of security tracking, whatever, that might interfere. I use one and I disable it just in case. Great. One of our speakers is having some troubles. Okay. One second speaker has some trouble getting into the room, but I think it will be solved by the time she's expected to talk. Let's start. I hope you can hear me. And well, this is the global access to the Internet for All research group. Welcome to the group. Today we have, well, now about like 45 minutes for the meeting. It's an RTF meeting that is part of the IETF, and as such, the standard NodeWell applies. And the meeting is probably recorded or broadcasted on YouTube, I think. Well, this is the standard information about the NodeWell. And then regarding the Gaia, this is just the charter of the Gaia working group. Just as a reminder that we are exploring the how the vision of global access faces the digital divide, and how this kind of never-ending problem, and this is what we investigate. And for that, Gaia has a set of objectives around visibility and interest on the challenges and the shared vision, and about promoting collaboration between different stakeholders, about documenting experiences and results, and bring different perspectives and think about how this research can inform IETF standardization efforts in other aspects. So regarding the agenda, first of all, I don't know if there is any volunteer to take notes while there is this chat. Sorry, part of the chat. There is a note-taking document. I already uploaded the agenda just to help start with something other than an empty piece of paper. So, well, I hope anyone volunteers. If not, since I typically take my notes, I will share them after the meeting. Okay, and then, regarding the agenda, we have 3 talks today. The first one is from Sol, from Sansaleni Mankosi in South Africa. It's a very particular environment in a rural in rural South Africa. A long-running experience called Sansaleni Networks, and then of course, since the environment is very different, the challenges are also very different, and I think even more in the recent times. Then there are 2 talks related to environmental aspects. One from Menan on energy and connectivity that comes from North Macedonia, from Skopje, a university environment. And finally, I'm also going to present about the general challenges of adapting the internet to address the environmental challenges. And we will take questions at the end of each talk, and then at the end of the session, if we have some time left, we can discuss anything else. Okay, so that's for my introduction, let's say. I don't know if there is any comment, and then we can go and move to Sol. I don't know, Sol, if you could finally join. And yeah, I see you as participant. I'm gonna stop sharing my video and audio, and then you can try to share your screen. Yeah, there is an icon on the top left that there is a microphone. You can push there, and then you will be able to share your audio. And then if you want to share your video, you can also click on the camera. Okay, I got a request to. Yeah. So I suppose you can talk now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. And would you like to share my presentation, or should I try and do that? Sorry, I'm kind of finding my way
As you
around
prefer.
this.
I can present your slides.
Yeah, that would be great. Just not to
Okay.
waste any more time with my fiddling.
Yeah, sure. It's coming.
Great. Just a little bit of context. So yeah, thank you very much again. And I guess what I wanted to share with you as briefly as I could is, first of all, the context in which we work. This is rural South Africa. We are a community network, and then maybe focus specifically as an illustration or something that I think has touched everyone's lives, which is, what is this, community network in rural South Africa within the COVID context? What does it do, right? So yes, if we can have the next slide, thank you. So very briefly, I'm just not sure how many of you are familiar with a community network model, very briefly to say, so it's in our case, we deal with either the difficulties of quality of access to the internet or ICTs, because there's no connectivity or no quality connectivity, or we deal with issues of access because it's not affordable. So while there may be connectivity, the majority of people, and I'm talking about the large majority of people, can't afford. So this is the environment in which we work in. We work where telco or traditional telecommunications large companies don't reach for either, as I say, because of signal or affordability. And also we look at things like ownership, appropriation of the technology, appropriation of the network. So in this case, we have a Wi-Fi network that is owned and operated by the community that it serves. So if I can have the next one, I'm very happy to go back and take questions, but I think I'll go quite quickly. Can we have the next slide? Yes. Okay, so we are Zenzeleni Community Networks, and in our context, we are the first cooperative-owned legal community network. If I can, next slide, in South Africa. So here I wanted to show, this is our team. This and the next slide shows the cooperatives. So the cooperatives are the companies that have been seeded in a community. What we call a community is actually a tribal delimitation. It's governed by a tribal authority, and there is a very pertinent sense of sharing and of community organization and governance. And so we have businesses, cooperatives, that are internet service providers within that delimitation that's already under the tribal authority. And we have one in the community called Mankosi, which is about 12 villages. And then if we go to the next slide, we have another one which is in a community called Zitulele, both with similar sort of settings. And then we also have a non-for-profit company, which you will see, I'm over there, and I don't know if any of you know Carlos, who's in APC. So if you can, yeah. And then we have a few companies that have the University of the Western Cape and a regulatory legal firm that has helped us to actually have to interpret the whole regulatory framework to be able to operate where we do. So if we can go next. So briefly, just to say, this came about from a research initiative by Carlos Remoreno and Jessia or Masibulele Sia. And I won't go into all of it, but really just to say, maybe in this forum, that there were so many different technological approaches that were tested throughout these 8 years. And the way that we have finally arrived at where we are is really responsive to the community needs and the challenges. We wanted to go with open source technology, and that proved to be at some point just unaffordable. So while we are always trying to adapt, get closer to values that we are technically more aligned with, and then having to balance it with economic reality, having to balance it with other challenges that maybe even social challenges, or even go as far as trying to support the community to access devices and access knowledge of how to use the ICT devices and how to access the internet. So the connectivity is just one element of a whole set of interrelated issues that form the digital divide here. Next slide, please. So I'm going quite fast because I want to give an overview and then leave space for questions. So this is where we are. Just wanted to give a sense of, we're talking about an area that historically was and politically was systemically underserviced. Roads were not developed, water, there isn't running water, or there are distribution taps, and the clinics or hospitals are very few and don't work very well, the schools as well. So really, there are very few things that work. And within this context, we eventually, after trying everything, we actually had to build our entire backbone from the city, connecting to fiber, through different projects, including with the Internet Society and APC and others. We were able to now create quite a robust backbone. We work on unlicensed frequencies in 2.5 and 5 gigahertz frequency. We have now a capacity to burst to 1 gigabyte. And we can carry, 300 megabits in, which we distribute amongst both of the communities. And then we've developed from that some services. Next slide, please. And so how the communities access internet here is either through hotspots, and I don't know what currencies most people are familiar with, but in rands, we have vouchers that are uncapped for a month for 25 rand, which I think is about, not even $2, I think $1 perhaps. Correct me if I'm wrong, Leandro, I'll look it up. And then we also have, to balance the business sustainability, we have direct access points to contracts, to those are local businesses or entrepreneurs or schools and clinics. And really just to say that when we moved, I must say this picture doesn't have the updated antennas. These are quite old antennas we don't have anymore. But the premise is the same, right? We have this backhaul that brings it to the community in hotspots, and it's the community that installs and operates. And it's through that installing and operating that people actually come a step closer to using ICTs in the benefit that maybe people in more urban settings take for granted. That's not the case here. I won't go into it, but if you think of all the things that you use on internet for, many might not apply to the rural settings. So in ownership, in building the actual network, there's also a demystifying and a coming closer to the technology. And Leandro, if you can go to the next one. I don't know how much time I have, but I just have 3 more slides about our COVID response. Do I have time for that?
Yeah, probably. Go ahead.
Yeah. So really that, just to illustrate, so what we had in the COVID setup when it first started, the biggest issues were that, reliable information wasn't accessible. So I put it, fake news, lots of it, and there were belief systems and power structures that were really filtering news that was not very useful. The other thing was that anything provided even by the World Health Organization or even locally by government was really focused on guidelines for middle to upper economic context in urban settings. And what we have is no running water. The transport to even get to a doctor is shared transport that sometimes doesn't even arrive. There's limited supplies of everything. And so none of the guidelines were actually applicable. Never mind that everything was in English and that very few people speak English. They speak the local language, is Xhosa. So with all that context, and obviously we had a lockdown, a national lockdown, so many people lost their jobs. So there was a higher strain, and if you remember, we work with people on the poverty line already. So higher economic strain and no access to actually information to keep safe. And the next slide. So we initiated two initiatives. On the first one was just, we used our network to provide free resources. And so first of all, it was to provide health and guidelines in the local language. But not only that, it was also applied to a specific context. So where you would have a typical sort of guideline saying, wash your hands and use this microfiber sort of cloth, we would have it in how do you use the network safely. And this is in the context of people sharing phones or devices, etc. And we went into different areas that, again, might seem so that one can take it for granted in an urban setting. In this setting, people couldn't filter, I suppose, or couldn't relate to what information was given to them. And so we created a place not only for the right information, but a way for people to have trust towards that information. And then just to go on to the last slide. And then we've set up this challenge now for people, which is called Our Stories, Our Internet. And again, this is about the work that is necessary to bridging the digital divide, which is about people feeling like this internet space and this technical space is also for them. And I can't stress this enough. Everything is for urban settings, and people in rural areas know that most things don't apply to them. So in this context, this challenge is about people submitting audio or written or visual content in their own language about how they have responded to COVID-19. We're also piloting this as a platform for marketing or sharing of local skills and crafts and so on. It's also brought in the youth, which is, Zenzeleni was always considered the old people's initiative. And we're also bringing in, prizes in the form of cash and network vouchers so that, we can also look at the huge economic strain that people are facing. So, yeah, this project is also supported with DFID and APC. And I think, Leandro, I'll stop there. I don't want to take more time. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. So we can move to the questions. You can either queue to talk or type on the chat and to ask any question. Well, in the meanwhile, while people think about their question, is in this setting you explained, there's always the local part and the local and the global part. How did you find it useful or an obstacle to have global access and the cost associated to it, or the value of the information that people could find somewhere else?
So I don't know if this answers your question, but what we've seen up to now is that, even though we've been going for so long, even though this is owned by the community, we saw by far a higher use of the network by the more savvy users, right? And the more savvy users are normally people that come from urban areas. Now, in COVID, what's been amazing is that the community-based use has gone from 9 terabytes to 19 terabytes. Oh, sorry, I think it's from 5 terabytes to 19. And so there is this real sort of click moment of, oh my gosh, like connectivity does serve me in my context. And this has all been through those 25 Rand vouchers. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. My general concern is that the internet tools are meant for everyone, or designed by some considering some particular environments. But when it comes such a situation, such an environment, well, there is the free access to local content. Free access to internet content has a cost, and how you dealt with those who can pay or want to pay, those who need access to the information but pay or not, and what are the troubles of adapting technology access to the internet and local content, local needs, content that is of general interest for health reasons, not only for entertainment. And
so I guess adapting, I'm not sure if your question is more towards adapting the costs or adapting the relevance of the network, or is it both?
I didn't get some of the words in the first part, but no, I was thinking about the mismatch between what the internet or the technology can offer and what the community needed in this
Yes.
situation.
Yes. So that is huge, actually. So I also participate in some global forums on different access programs and so on. And I don't know, for example, just last year, there was a big, I think in the IGF, a big, context on e-commerce. And I go to that extreme because, e-commerce, people have such they base it on the idea of internet is for all. It's accessible to all. It should be to serve all. And e-commerce is understood as something that is more, I think, inclusive somehow, because anyone can play in it and so on. And yet, in these cases, even if somebody had the money to buy something on e-commerce, there is no delivery that goes as far as that. I mean, you have to drive 2.5 hours over roads that sometimes flood and you can't access to get to the nearest city. And I don't know if that illustrates for you, but that is the daily experience of, what ICTs and the internet promise, and what the reality is on the ground. So just another example. Sorry, go on.
No, probably there are many examples, but this is one where we assume things that close the loop, but the loop is not there.
Yeah, and I just maybe to answer the question on the chat about satellite, and I don't know if I get it 100%, but what we have looked at satellite, and it might bring down the costs. Well, it might bring down the cost of having to maintain a backhaul, but the equipment costs are so expensive and so difficult to get hold of that they are then, they kind of don't close that cycle. So I don't know if that answers the question on the chat, but every assumption has to be re-looked at, including, I remember once, a plug-and-play solution that we could use, but it needed a power tool to put it up. But we didn't have power, so you can't use power tools. So sometimes the most effective solutions are in the most mundane details.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, typically IETF looks at interoperability, but also maybe we need to look more carefully into applicability in different scenarios to make sure that things work as expected everywhere. So I think it's interesting because I didn't see that question in the chat. So forgive me if I miss any question on the chat because it seems I don't get everything. But if no other question is pending, we can move to the next question. Thank you very much, Sol, for that. And maybe in the last minutes, we can also comment on further questions that may come from the participants. So
sure,
thank you very much.
Leandro. Thank you.
So now we move to Menan. Menan, are you willing to switch on your mic, camera, or presentation? I don't hear you. Yeah, now you have the floor.
Yeah.
For audio, you can also, okay. You can also switch on your camera if you want, but not mandatory. And you can also push the button to share your slides on your screen, or otherwise I can do it for you.
Yeah, can you share it? That would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think now it's ready. Okay, you can start.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Menan. Thank you for this opportunity. I mean, it's a great opportunity. I'm Menan, and I am a researcher and associate professor at the Southeast European University, North Macedonia. North Macedonia is quite a small country in the Southeast Europe, 2 million country. I have a PhD from UPC in Barcelona. I was working with a group of Leandro in community networks the last 4 or 5 years. And then I continued research on community networks in University of Cambridge as a postdoc, and then working on the intersection between edge, cloud, blockchain, and community networks, right? So this is my second Gaia talk after the IETF 101 in London, and I'm really quite excited to be part of it. So the topic of presentation today is energy and connectivity. Honestly, it's a quite new topic I'm diving to. It has been like 4 or 5 months that I'm working on this topic, and I'm trying to get the.
I lost you.
Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, I lost you for a moment.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
just a bit of background about the university that I am. So Southeast European University is a private public, not for profit higher education in North Macedonia. Mainly, it's a quite new university. It's like 20 years university, and it was sponsored mainly by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, EU Commission, and USAID. So mainly, what it makes special this university, it has around 6,000 students, and it has a very nice campus, green campus. What it makes special is that the CU campus has started the path to sustainability a few years ago, and the aim was to manage carbon and energy more efficiently. So the realization of Climate Action Plan, or it's a project, Climate Action Plan constitutes basically a roadmap to get universities to the goals of climate protection, to define a carbon footprint, identify priority actions and milestones to measure progress and for the environmental sustainability, right? So, so CU was one of the universities that started this project, and here in the pictures you can see some of the photos of the green campus and this initiative. So I'm gonna shortly explain about what we are doing inside and what are our targets. You can go to the next slide, Dan. Oops. Yeah. Third slide. So the Climate Action Plan was kind of like a project which started in 2010, and starting from 2010 up to 2020, in each phase of the project, new things were added in order and introducing high energy efficiency measure and renewable energy technologies. So basically, through this project, we wanted to see the current energy consumption and greenhouse gases, or GHG emissions, we wanted to analyze this in order to implement a carbon-friendly measures for university campus, and then see if this can scale to the cities and bigger environments. So basically, we just designed some protocols to get this GHG emission values, and that was like the protocol just included some kind of scopes. In the first scope, we were just putting the direct GHG emissions, and these were the emissions occurring from sources that are completely owned by or controlled by the university. Here were the measures taken by the let's say included the measures included like values coming from the boilers, from the vehicles in the university campus, and other things. And then in the second category, we tried to put like indirect GHG emissions, and indirect emissions was kind of basically emissions purchased, mainly was the electricity which was purchased from outside, right? So all these measures were analyzed, were measured by the energy guys at the university, and these graphs that you hear and these graphs that you see here shows the total campus emissions. You can see that for the last 5 years, this is increasing, and now we have something like in 2010, we had like 5.2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, right? And this was the measure that was measured in that time. And this, for that time, was alarming, and we needed, the university needed to do something in order to try to reduce this thing. We can go to the next one. So basically, the climate action plan came into the university, and this started in each phase from 2010. The things were added, and here, for instance, you can see the big giant solar panels or photovoltaics added at the university. For instance, in the first picture, you see 2,000 meters square solar panels added, and they are serving at the same time as the car shelters for the cars at the university. Each building in the university added like a solar panel, which was like linked to the building or the department, and in this way, the university became, in terms of the became a source for generating green energy, right? So and this was just about the energy, right? That we wanted to produce, because the energy was one of the biggest factors that was increasing the carbon footprint. So and I just got like yesterday some values, and I from the university, and based on these things, this installation that we have at the university, something about the CU campus is able to cover 28% of the current electricity through these solar panels. So this was like, we produce around 28% of the total energy through these solar panels. Energy, was it enough? No, we wanted also to make also the building sustainable. Like, can we go to the next slide? For instance, since energy purchase was one of the main factors for carbon footprint, we wanted to see it was not enough for the sustainable energy to reduce the carbon footprint. So the other thing that we wanted to do is like, okay, make the building sustainable. And this, we just built it like pilot buildings at the university, and each building, each department that we have now, it's like sustainable energy. And one of the pictures that you see on the right, the green one, it's where the office where I'm sitting, and it's totally sustainable energy building. So this includes like a geothermal heat pump, a heating and cooling system, which allows replacing the conventional, let's say, centralized heating system. On top of the building, there are solar panels. These solar panels are producing energy, and this energy is heating the water that comes to the buildings. And then you have the ventilation system, and then you have like solar shading structures, totally sustainable. You have lots of data coming from the energy, data monitoring system, automatic lighting, and all the buildings at the university were just all this let's say these technologies, sustainable technologies, were installed at the university, and we had the campus in a way sustainable. So can we go to the next slide? So, and this more or less shows what is the if we compare like how was the GHG emission in 2009, and we do a forecast in 2020, we see that we almost, for this 10 years period, we reduced the emission for 35%, which is in line with the 1.5 directive Paris Agreement, if I'm not wrong, like 35 to 50% reducing the emission, right? So this was nice, and this was what the actual campus looks like. Like we try to reduce the emissions there. But since I went to the campus, since I started working there, I was interested more about the connectivity. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, next slide, please. So I was working mainly in Barcelona in GIFINet community network. I'm really amazed from the network and the initiative of community networks. So my intention was like, can we build kind of green energy kind of supported community network? So we applied to the Ministry of Informatics here in Macedonia. I was saying that we want to build. We have this sustainable energy, which is we produce at the campus. It's already there, and it's producing like lots of. Each building is producing its own energy from the solar panels and the other sources. Like, can we build kind of like? I want to see the effect of building a community network connectivity using these green energy sources. So what we actually is doing is like we taking into account the GIFINet network, which is in Catalonia in Spain, and I've been working during my PhD in the QMP network, which is like a subset of GIFI in the city of Barcelona. So taking that model and applying here, I wanted to see like by taking some nanostation M5 devices, which as Sol said, like working on the unlicensed spectrum 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, we built like a point-to-point network, and each of these devices in a way it's connected to the renewable energy sources. So by connecting them to these renewable energy sources, we have a connectivity which is like totally, it is coming from the green energy. So can we go to the next slide? So in a way, we have a test bed at the university for the moment, which we would like to test how the connectivity can be improved, or is it functional? Is it sustainable, the connectivity, by using the green energy source? And here, for instance, it's a bit like abstract picture, but the green dots are the trafo station that the energy comes, and then and we have these smart metering systems, and in each smart meters we put this nanostation point-to-point links. In a way, we are building a wireless mesh network, and we see, and we want to see like how this will work together. This is quite a new, challenging, very practical project, which just like two or 3 months ago started. We are in the process of installing these devices in the close to the green energy sources, and see what we can do. Basically, we would like to test, to do some service orchestration, like using services from different small clouds that you have here, or service migrations, or and so on. So if you have any questions, this was my presentation, I guess. If I guess I don't have other slides.
Okay, thank you very much. Any quick question about what we saw? Which, by the way, it's nice because it complies with the this ITU or the IPCC expectations for the 1.5 degrees scenario, which shows how much effort is needed.
Yes.
Okay, well, if there is no other question, I think we can move to the last presentation, and then in the last moments we can comment questions for any other presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, in fact, my presentation is related to this previous one. This is a specific example, and mine is a general reflection about the general issue of environmental sustainability. So, but you know me, and this is a discussion about the situation we are facing, not the COVID one, but the environmental challenge one. And when we talk about Gaia in connectivity for everyone, we have the issue that it means a lot of machines, it means a lot of devices. It also means a lot of connections, sensors. People have more than one device. There is the energy, as we saw, and then, well, you can agree or not that the climate change is a challenge, or how big is a challenge, but there is one. And the typical metric people use to talk about it is greenhouse gas emissions, the equivalent of CO2, but it's just a measure to reflect what we have. This figure comes from a recent ITU recommendation, L1470, that talks about that but in a decade, more or less, by 2030, we have to reduce about the environmental impact of ICT to about half. Let's say, despite the development of ICT is growing, we need to divide by 2 if we want to comply or contribute to the 1.5 degrees scenario from IPCC. It's not just like the ICT part, it's also that there is the need for energy, and we need to also make sure what we burn to produce the electricity. And electricity seems to be an ingredient that ICT technology is going to use more and more, even though it's becoming more efficient. Just a couple of numbers. I mean, if you look at the bill of materials for a device, And you can see that production and raw material acquisition is most of it for a smartphone, or in the case of these greenhouse emissions from a smartphone under slightly different conditions than the other study, shows that, well, among these 90 units, 50 are related to the manufacturing of the device, but then there is some contribution from the servers that respond to requests from the phone, and then the rest is networking cost. So we can reduce this part if we use the device longer, let's say, proportion, but there is a part that relates to the internet, which is from 49 or so up to 90, which is then internet contribution to it. Just quickly, I would say we need to think, or it would be interesting to think about what would be the scenario by 2030 or what 2040. And then we could discuss how to achieve that scenario. And then that requires, or that might require probably changes in different aspects, like in the architecture, like more caching, more locality in the protocols, maybe to reduce the overhead, to slow down some protocols, to make messages less verbose and compress them, perhaps, to tweak parameters like timers and things. If I just checked on energy regarding RFCs, and well, there are some examples of RFCs that discuss about how to improve, optimize energy in some of them. Can we perhaps generalize and provide some general guidelines if useful? There are even more radical approaches like going to local cloud, edge for computing. Think about devices which are not owned by people, but which are simply used, and like all people might remember X terminals, and or things like, for instance, metering, accounting, reporting the environmental impact of using a device, maybe having kind of environmental budgets, promoting reuse, ensuring traceability and accountability of devices from along the circular life of a device from manufacturing to recycling, putting limits, doing a kind of just crazy ideas, environmental congestion control, rate limits on protocols for environmental reasons, and well, I think the discussion it's important for Gaia because we typically discuss for all and for everything, but well, it shouldn't be at any environmental cost. And then think about how the internet can contribute to sustainability in positive and negative terms. Of course, it allows more intelligence, more control, savings, but also it has these rebound effects of promoting more global interaction and more trips and so on. I think we have to be aware that already we surpassed the environmental limits of the world already quite long, and we need to think in terms of scarcity. So my question will be, do you have ideas about how to turn all these work discussions into something that is useful for society and particularly for standardization efforts? That would be great if you have any idea. And that's my presentation. Thank you. So I wonder if there is some time left for questions, comments. I think we can talk in the worst case for between 1 to 5 minutes. So anyone? Well, I mean, it shouldn't be now, but yeah, Sol, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to impress on what Menan had said, and you, Leandro, is that we've really struggled to find, in some cases, the right kind of balance between equipment that would work with renewable energy. For example, more potent net metal repeaters and hotspots would actually not work with unless you sort of oversize the solar and battery power. And that is a recurring issue for us. So, yeah, I just wanted to just say I'm really glad that you're bringing up power as one of the issues. And that's the case also not only for the network, but for the devices. And if we're looking at, stats that this is not the not a minority, that in Africa, 60% of people live in similar scenarios that I've put across, power just becomes such a central issue. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, this is something that we forget, or that we forget in the developed world, and sometimes we drive a second-hand car or have no car at all, but we have always buy new devices, and because they get obsolete very soon. So that's a luxury we cannot afford, perhaps. And then when we talk about the internet for all, it shouldn't be a brand new internet all the time, with spending materials and energy without limit. Okay, so if you have any question, if not, we can continue in the mailing list. So think about it and let us know if you have an idea about to include the environmental agenda into the internet for all, to contribute and not to be an obstacle. Because as we saw, the challenge is hard. It's complying with the scenarios is very difficult. How to do it is really, really a challenge. Okay, I think we are now on the time. So if there is no other comment or question, so thank you very much for joining the Gaia working group. And I'm looking forward to see your comments in the mailing list. Okay, bye everyone. Bye-bye. Well, let me say in the meanwhile that there is a very interesting session just after this one on HRPC. So we recommend you to go, because it also talks about, rights, not environmental rights at the moment, but human rights in protocols. So also very interesting and related discussion. Okay, bye.